Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Premier Football Podcast here on PFP Media. As always, I'm your host, Rafe Garland, joined by my good mate, Joe Doherty. Joe, before we get into the football, do you have anything enjoyable to talk about that happened this weekend? Any short story to save us from the depression and the gloom of supporting the two clubs that we do?
No, not really, Rafe. It was just all doom and gloom for both of us. I got it on Saturday and you got it on Sunday, so it was a real treat for both of us. What I will say though is that I like to listen to BBC Radio 5 Live breakfast over the weekend. It just sets you up for the day very well, I find, when I'm making breakfast for the family. And whoever was presenting was in Greater Manchester, and he was talking about the lovely snow that he had falling in his back garden. And I mean, it is freezing cold in Ireland, and we did have a sprinkling of snow just now, but it's just so unfair that like literally 45 minutes away on a plane in Manchester, which is pretty much on the same latitude as Dublin, that you get piles and piles and piles of lovely snow. And I know you're not the biggest fan of the snow, but man, given the whole lockdown situation, how miserable that is, given how freezing cold it is in this country, the fact that it's just very unfair that we don't get proper snow, I always find. And always have done.
Well, look, we're quite a mountainous country, so if we were able to potentially ski, then I think I'd enjoy the snow. But to be honest, other than that, it's just a pain in the balls. Speaking of pains in the balls, Joe, we'll move on to the football anyway. This week's show is primarily going to focus on Liverpool and their title defence or lack of. Obviously losing 4-1 to Manchester City yesterday evening. Manchester City now hold a 10-point lead over Liverpool. They've got a game in hand over all the challengers. They look set to run away with it. But what we want to do today is look at what has gone wrong for Liverpool this season. As a Liverpool fan, I tend to say that injuries have played a big part in this season. But Joe, looking in from the outside, what are the things that appear most obvious to people not directly associated with the club?
Yeah, I think that recruitment is a big one. If we go back to the summer just gone, Liverpool spent a good amount of money I suppose. They spent £74 million, 41 million on Jota, 20 on Thiago, and 11.5 on Kostas Tsimikas. And those were three positions that they did need to bring players in on. A reserve left back for Andy Robertson, that's a fair move. Another forward, and a more creative central midfielder than they already had. But at the same time, they sold players for the value of £42 million, and I really feel that a net spend of £32 million as champions, when Manchester City are as good as they are and are bound to be much more hungry this season, obviously having failed to retain the Premier League title last season, I think that Liverpool could have done a whole lot more over the summer. And there are two other positions that I think scream out for having needed improvement on, and that is central defence and centre forward. I'm not talking about wide players who can play across the front line. I'm talking about a plan B. Liverpool don't really have that. The only option off the bench is Divock Origi. I mean, they could have gone out and brought in a completely different type of striker, just someone that Liverpool put in so many crosses. Someone who can get on the end of those crosses very comfortably, I think, would have been a great move for them. For me, that's where it starts, but there are a lot more problems as well than just the summer just gone. And if we move into the January transfer window, I think that's even worse. To move so late and to sign two rookie centre backs, neither of whom have featured in starting 11s in the first two games. I think Ben Davies hasn't even made a match day squad in the first two games since he's been available. I don't understand that at all. I mean, you need to be signing players who are ready to come in and do a job immediately, given the situation that Liverpool are currently in, not players who are going to need weeks and weeks, because it's going to come to a point in time where there's nothing to play for. Like Liverpool had a chance after beating Spurs to get back on form. I mean, imagine if they had beaten City yesterday. That would have changed everything. Instead, Liverpool find themselves 10 points behind City, and City have a game in hand on them. That's it's a nail in the coffin for Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, look, the last two games have obviously been especially tough to take. City are a fantastic team, but going down at home to Brighton was obviously difficult. They've lost 3 home games in a row now, the first time in Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool career that he's lost 2 consecutive games. But to focus on the recruitment, I mean, I think everybody at the start of the season knew that Liverpool were going in one centre back light, having let Dejan Lovren go and not replaced him. And we've spoken a lot about Joe Matip and Joe Gomez and relying on those two to stay fit. I don't want to get bogged down on defensive injuries, but what I will say is, where does the money come from to be spent? I know that Liverpool were defending champions on the back of the summer, but the pandemic had already started. Liverpool lost 60 million euro last year because of match day revenue, fans not coming into the stadium. And from what we've seen about Liverpool's recruitment over the years is that it's incredibly well planned in advance. That they rarely go out and sign players on a whim, and then these signings don't work out. The big money that they have invested has normally been for players that have worked out. I think the only one exception to that is maybe Christian Benteke, who they signed for £42 million in 2016, a signing that didn't fit the squad and didn't work out. But we have seen the owners and Michael Edwards plan big signings in advance and pull them off early in windows. So from what I've heard in the club, they have big plans this summer with regards to an attacking player, maybe a genuine number 9, someone that the fans can get excited about. And that's rumored to be why they were reluctant to spend big in January, because they knew that they were working with a limited cash flow. I think they had thought that they might have been able to secure transfers out of the club in the shapes of Divock Origi and Xherdan Shaqiri. That's why a couple of these players had featured so much in the build-up to the January window, was to almost put them in the shop window so that they could go. In the end, they let Taki Minamino go out on loan because he was the only one that the offer came in for. But I think it comes down to money. We've never seen Liverpool's owners dip their hand into their pocket and invest their own cash in the club. It's not a situation like you have at Chelsea or Manchester City where they're working with an infinite amount of resources. Obviously, they're rich owners. They don't put anything in. It's an
Arsenal model, man. It's an Arsenal. It's the same as the Arsenal model.
But they don't. They also don't take anything out.
If you look at
if you look at the other big clubs, Manchester United, sure they invest money in the club, but they also take a lot of money back out of the club, and not only that, but they lump a lot of debt onto the club. I think Liverpool would have been in a position to spend, given their recent success in the Champions League, in the Premier League, all of this record revenue that they had made, the increased sales around Asia and stuff, but the global pandemic really hampered their ability to go out and spend based on the financial model that they work within and based on their long-term targets. And that's what you'll hear Klopp talking about all the time, is that we only want long-term players. Even in January, we hope that the short-term answers can be the long-term answers. So I think they made a conscious decision to take a gamble with the centre half at the start of this season, one that's backfired massively. And then when they realised that there wasn't a perfect fix for the situation in January, rather than going out and spending 30 or 40 million on a ready-made centre half that they hoped might fit into the squad, I think that they decided to wait until the summer. They're still looking at their long-term targets. Coyote, Upamecano, Caleta Carr, all coming in potentially from abroad. They do still want to sign a defender in the summer as well, but they want to get the right one in. It's been massively disappointing not seeing the new centre halves come into the team, but as we've seen with Jurgen Klopp, he's been at Liverpool for 5 years and he's never thrown players that aren't ready into the starting team. We watched him hold back Fabinho for 6 or 7 months last season. Only a few weeks ago, we were praising how well he handled that situation. So I think we will see the new players, especially Kabak. He's the one that seems to come more highly rated, but he's only 20 years old. He's just moved, like we spoke about, to a new country, a new environment. Again, in the middle of a pandemic, these things are difficult. And if he was to be thrown into that game yesterday and they were beaten 4-5-1, the fans would never want to see him play for the club again.
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate here, I obviously take that on board. I know how Liverpool operate their canny in the transfer market, and they don't spend money when they don't have to. I think that Liverpool easily could have got a short-term loan deal for an experienced centre-back, someone who, I don't know, just to name a name, Jerome Boateng, for example, someone who Klopp would have been able to work with very easily, obviously coming from the same country, from the same league, and they would have had to spend obviously on his wages, but the loan fee would have been relatively small, and it's risk-free. Someone like that, that's just an example, could easily come into the starting 11 and play against Manchester City after just a couple of training sessions. To ask the likes of Ben Davies and Ozan Kabak to come in and do that is a tough ask, which is why I was saying, like, those. I mean, they got two of the same type. They got two young, unproven centre backs.
Well, Ben Davies is 25, but I suppose that is young for a centre half.
25.
Yeah, he's played he has as many senior appearances as Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Wow.
Obviously, Trent is still young, but he's been playing consistently for 3 or 4 years at this stage.
Yeah, I know that Kabak is
he's only 20, but again, 20, he's been playing Bundesliga for 3 or 4 seasons at this stage.
Which from but he only had something like 20 caps.
He won Bundesliga Rookie of the Year 2019, which is essentially Young Player of the Year. I don't think...
well, Sead Kolasinac won I think Bundesliga Left Back of the Year one year. So I think
Divock Origi won Worst Player of Ligue 1 before he returned to Liverpool from his loan spell.
Yeah, he did. We could take these things with a pinch of salt.
I think it comes back to not wanting to put players in too soon. Even if Klopp had gone out and signed an experienced player, I think he thinks so highly of his own tactics and Liverpool's system that he wouldn't believe that anybody could come in and play this way straight away. He has trust in Henderson and Fabinho. And look, I would have preferred to see even one of them playing in midfield yesterday and Nat Phillips keep his place at the back, because there's someone that has been playing centre half for Liverpool in the league for the last few weeks and he's been playing well. So I was surprised to see him drop out. But to go back to the recruitment and the spending money, maybe they could have had an experienced loan in, but I think they think so highly of their own recruitment that honestly, I think that Kabak could well work out and could well be this long-term addition that they want, and potentially even Davies as well, given time to work. If Klopp has given time to work with them. Obviously, Liverpool are in the middle of a difficult run of fixtures, and I think that again they took another gamble that they might be able to get through them. They would have thought they would have beaten Brighton at home. I think that came as a shock to everybody, and then on the back of that, I think Klopp went too defensive against Manchester City, and this has been a big feature of Liverpool this season, is trying to be too defensive, trying to protect, going above and beyond to protect who's ever playing at centre half, because Klopp obviously doesn't trust them as genuine centre halves. What we've seen from Liverpool over the years is this desire to win the ball back early. The higher up the pitch you can win the ball back, the more chance you have of dominating the game and creating chances. And we've not seen Liverpool on the front foot. We've seen them scrambling to get back behind the ball, almost like a bottom half team do when they give the ball away, trying to find their shape as quickly as they can, get back in behind the ball. And I think that really is what's leading to this lack of intensity that we've seen from Liverpool on the pitch.
Yeah, well, I think even going back to the early stages of the season, that was very clear. Even when Liverpool were winning games, I remember Sky Sports did a piece looking at Roberto Firmino's form and not talking about goals, which has obviously been a contentious issue for him. He's obviously never really been a prolific goal scorer. That's not his game. But what he has excelled in and how he made Liverpool tick so well was his amount of sprints and his amount of ball recoveries high up the pitch. But this season, those numbers are way down, and the impact that has on Liverpool's overall style of play and Liverpool's consistency and Liverpool's ability to score goals in a consistent way and to just thrash teams left, right, and centre has been detrimental.
Yeah, and if we can, I know we don't want to get bogged down on injuries, but if I can just kind of go through for a minute how the injuries have affected that style of play. Liverpool would traditionally start with Virgil van Dijk and Joe Gomez at centre half, the two fastest players in the Liverpool squad, according to the players and the manager. Having players with this recovery speed and the 1v1 defensive attributes of Virgil van Dijk allow Liverpool to commit a crazy number of attackers forwards in possession and also a crazy number of defenders forwards to press the ball when they don't have it, knowing that these guys are there at the back. So obviously without these guys playing, what Liverpool have been doing is their fullbacks haven't been attacking as much. They've been looking to get back into shape as soon as they can. And the personnel that they've been playing in midfield are not slower, but again, more defensive minded. They're looking to get back in and find this shape. Because Fabinho and Jordan Henderson have been taken out of the midfield and put into defence, these are the two guys that are incredibly important to how Liverpool play in midfield. What Jordan Henderson does, running around, covering every single blade of grass, coordinating the press, shouting at his teammates, he drives Liverpool up the pitch again, and he doesn't allow teams the opportunity to pass through them. And most importantly, as good as Jordan Henderson was last season and how much he was touted as Liverpool's best midfielder, I think they've missed Fabinho so much in midfield. What he brings to the team is he brings quick transitions. When Liverpool would give the ball away, the amount of times last season that he recovered it within one or two passes, as teams went to launch counterattacks, Fabinho would just clatter somebody and he'd win the ball back. But by playing in defence, he doesn't have the license to make these kind of challenges because he's going to give away a free kick on the edge of the box or a penalty or whatever it is. But also he can't step forwards and engage defenders. And that's what he's so good at. He's not like Virgil van Dijk where he stands off players and lets them run at him. Fabinho loves getting up in people's faces and making tackles. And by turning defence into attack quickly, that's where Liverpool have excelled. And when they turn the ball over, as teams are attacking them, then there's space in behind for Liverpool to counter into and to run into. That space hasn't been there for Mo Salah, and especially Sadio Mane, I think, has suffered from a real lack of space out there. Because the whole team is dropping deeper again, the wingers are getting caught in the same space that Liverpool's fullbacks tend to attack into. So those crossfield passes that we see from Trent Alexander and Robertson aren't on. And because they're deeper again, we're not seeing the outball that we saw so much last season. Virgil van Dijk his trademark pass from that left side of defence over the diagonal to Mo Salah. We've not seen anyone attempt that. I don't know if it's a confidence thing that they don't have or whether Salah's not making those runs, but we don't see that outball from Liverpool as well. So Liverpool are getting bogged deep in their own half. They're not being able to press as high up without these personnel in midfield. Firmino is completely wasted playing in this system. If you're going to play men behind the ball and try counter-attack, Firmino isn't the player that you want leading that line. You want somebody that's absolutely rapid. He's designed to play as part of this press with Henderson and with Fabinho, and that's the role Thiago was signed to play in as well as part of that midfield. So he's now trying to fill holes on the right side of midfield in the number 6 and in positions that he wasn't signed to play in. So what we're seeing is this Liverpool jigsaw that's been assembled perfectly to play in this style is now missing loads of pieces, and the pieces that they're trying to put in just aren't of the same mold at all.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly when this Sky piece was written, but it was definitely very early on in the season. I mean, Van Dijk might have just been injured, but it was kind of looking back at even to the end of last season, and Firmino's numbers in that regard had dropped off in terms of his I mean, man, this Liverpool team that played so well, not this season obviously, but the 2 or 3 seasons before, they have been asked to do arguably more physically than any other top Premier League team in history. And not only that, they've been asked to do it with a very small squad because they've been performing so well. Klopp, and it was such a unique system that the players had to understand. And that's very much, as you've outlined yourself, that's very much Klopp's philosophy, that it's not a system that players can just come into immediately. So he's gone down the route of a very small squad. His demands on them have been extremely high.
He never made any substitutions either for 3 years.
He never made substitutions. He never rested players. It was always the same 11. Liverpool have had a thin squad. I mean, even last year, looking at the bench, I was like, that's not great. But Liverpool never got injuries and their players never went out of form. And now Liverpool are getting injuries and now Liverpool's players are out of form. And for me, looking in from the outside, it's probably been a long time coming. Because it's unsustainable to be asking the player, and we said this a few years ago because of what happened at Dortmund. It's unsustainable to be asking players to be playing like this with such a small squad. But I suppose he has to have a small squad for it to work at the same time. So now it's time for him to move on to his next team, and I do think that there's going to be a clear out this summer. I do think that at least one, if not 2, of that front 3 will be moved on, probably Firmino and Mane. And we're going to see a different Liverpool, and that's just inevitable if he wants to be playing this style of football.
I think they took a step in the right direction by going out and signing Diogo Jota over the summer. He's obviously only 20,
I do as well.
He's only
and 24.
Thiago,
I think that's good.
Jota is only 24 and he fits the pressing style perfectly as well. And I think he's been a much bigger miss than people would have expected at the start of the season. He's back in training in a couple of weeks, and I think that we'll see a massive change in attacking fortune once he comes back into the team, because he brings a massive energy to the team. He can play wide, he can play centrally, he can play behind the striker. He gives more options.
Man, what was Jota doing when he was playing? He was
scoring,
winning games.
He was scoring goals,
he was coming off the bench. He was coming off the bench and winning games for Liverpool.
Yeah,
consistently.
So
I take that away and.
They did identify the need for a new attacking player. They have gone out and signed him. I think that there is talks of a new attacker coming in the summer as well. So I think you're definitely right in saying that front three is going to be freshened up. Signing Thiago as well was more competition in midfield. Gini Wijnaldum may be going out. So I think that was the replacement there. Curtis Jones, I think, has probably been Liverpool's most consistent midfielder this season. Definitely one of their best attacking players. And he's the future of that midfield as well. So he's definitely going to come in. They've signed these young centre halves that are hopefully going to freshen it up and can learn. So I think you're right that we will see a new look Liverpool next year, but I think that process is already underway. So as much as this is a season that Liverpool have been plagued by injuries, it's also the beginning of, what do they call them, a transition season or whatever, however you want to phrase it. And look, when Diogo Jota is back in a couple of weeks, and when we can start seeing the midfielders playing in midfield, and potentially even seeing one of these defenders coming back at the end of the season, we might see this Liverpool team a bit earlier than we think. And if they can hold on in competitions as the Champions League, it's not impossible that they finish the season with some sort of silverware.
Yeah, I was going to mention the Champions League, but I think we need to mention the FA Cup as well, and that's a very disappointing defeat. As Liverpool can't be losing to this Manchester United in the FA Cup. For me, that's unacceptable, completely unacceptable, because of the levels that Liverpool have set. Manchester United are not better than Liverpool. I'm not having that. I think that
no. And look, really I think Liverpool set out to win that game, Joe, and I think that
they did. Of course they did.
Better football, of course they did. But they had a 19-year-old, and 18. He was still 18 at the time, the week before his 19th birthday, making his fourth or fifth appearance for Liverpool, and he clearly wasn't ready. He made a couple of big mistakes, and look. Marcus Rashford in form capitalised on it. And that's all it was. Liverpool outplayed United that day. They scored goals that day. I think they defended relatively well as a team. There was an individual error from a young guy at the back who wasn't ready. And that's all that is. And look, that's part and parcel of, I suppose, what we spoke about, the lack of planning at the start of the season and going in one centre-half light. But to be honest, knowing how the season's gone, Joe, even if we had had an extra two centre-halves at the start of the season, they probably would have gone and got injured, because it's just ridiculous at this stage.
Well, when it rains, it pours, Rafe. And speaking of rain, it's actually snowing right now.
Here, will you stop with the snow?
I love the snow, man. And it is snowing. I was going to say, a question for you. What position is Fabinho? And to follow up from that, what position is Jordan Henderson?
They're midfielders, Joe, and they need to be playing in midfield. And hopefully, look, this is the thing. And I know that I'd asked you to ask the difficult questions of me today, but I have a difficult question for Jurgen Klopp, and that is, if it is not working, playing the midfielders at the back, okay? He doesn't trust the defenders, so he's playing midfielders there instead. But if the midfielders aren't playing any better than these than these defenders that aren't ready, why are we hampering ourselves in midfield as well as defense? You know,
this is it.
Why don't
play at least one of them
forwards? Play them both in midfield.
No.
Play our best midfielders. And then by playing by playing Henderson and Fabinho in midfield, what that will do is that will have us pressing higher up the pitch. That will have us winning the ball back before these attacks start. I don't think you could play Nat Phillips and Kabak right now. I think you have to play one of Fabinho. What do we have to lose? They're not defenders. They're not defenders.
What I would say, Rafe, what I would say is that it was definitely clear that Klopp's thinking this season was, if we have a defensive crisis, Fabinho is going to play centre back.
Yeah,
so he's thought of him as the fourth choice centre back.
That was a great idea.
When you think of the midfield that Liverpool have, there's no argument to say that Henderson, Thiago, and Wijnaldum is not a midfield that can be retaining the Premier League.
But Fabinho
this wasn't meant to be a bridging season.
Fabinho is the best in that midfield.
Then why is he being classed as your right now first choice centre back? Right now, he's your first choice centre
This
back.
is the question that I have, Joe, of Jurgen Klopp. You know, if I can see how important Fabinho and Jordan Henderson are to how Liverpool play football in midfield, surely Jurgen Klopp has to do that because he designed the system.
Of course. But man, so if Fabinho is a class centre back as well, I do have to say that. I think he's really, really good. I think he's your second best centre back.
I agree,
And
but he's
by
definitely
beside
our
Van Dijk,
best midfielder. And it's our midfield is all over the place at the moment. We've been starting Jordan.
Well, no, I think first and foremost you need to get Jordan Henderson
in midfield.
First and foremost, you need to get Jordan Henderson back in midfield. I think he's your most important midfielder
Liverpool
because he's the one who brings all the energy.
Liverpool have lost 2 games since October 2018 that Jordan Henderson has started in midfield, both away to Manchester City.
Well, there you go. That's what I was saying. He's your most important midfielder. I have to ask another question on this. What is one of the main reasons why Manchester City did not defend their league title last season? Just talking about City, not talking about Liverpool being so good, but about City themselves. What was one of their biggest mistakes? The
argument was that Laporte was injured. They didn't replace Company.
But what were they doing at centre back for the majority of the season?
They were playing Fernandinho
and
Fernandinho and
Rodri. They were playing Fernandinho and Rodri together. They were alternating. And did it work?
No, it didn't, Joe, because they took the most important part of their defensive shape in that midfield and played him as a defender. And didn't
and what position is Fernandinho?
He's a holding midfielder, man.
And what position is Rodri?
He's a holding midfielder.
Then why is it? And what position were they being asked to play in?
They're being asked to play centre back, and did
it work?
No, and Klopp's fallen into the same trap as well. Yeah, look.
He has. Don't do things that don't work time and time again is the definition of insanity.
Do you know what I will say about Manchester City, though, Joe? They're being praised for this comeback, and Ruben Diaz is being hailed as the best signing since Virgil van Dijk. Manchester City are 3 points better now than they were at this stage last season.
That's because their start to the season was appalling and people were saying Pep should be sacked. It's because the run since then has been so good. I'll try to pull up their stats, but they have won.
Yeah, but look at who they've been playing. Those are a handful of cup draws against lower league teams, and they've been playing bottom half Premier League teams.
What?
Mickey Mouse.
They just beat Liverpool 4-1
before that game. And look, Alisson gifted them 2 goals and ducked under the way of a 4th goal.
Like Alisson's kicking is the worst kicking from a goalkeeper I've ever seen in my life.
He clearly wasn't well. He was off all week sick, and then he was asked to play last night in what was one of the coldest nights of the year in the UK. And man, imagine, I don't know if you've ever spent much time in goals. You get cold on a summer's day,
thankfully
standing
not.
There. So imagine you're prone to the odd illness or the odd ailment. Yeah. Imagine being asked to stand out in shorts and a t-shirt in the middle of Liverpool on a.
Here he was wearing thermals, long sleeve and trousers. He always wears trousers.
Imagine being asked to stand still for 2 hours outdoors on like a 0 degrees, -1 degree night. Really, really windy, you know, this ice and snow that you're talking about around you. When you're feeling really unwell, Joe, you've got that head cold, you've got the shivers, you know.
Yeah, I'd hate it. But I'll tell you what, when the ball came to me, I'd want to warm so much that I'd put my foot through it and at least put it into touch. Just to go back on what you're saying about City, since the 28th of November, they have won 12 out of 14 games.
Who are those teams? Tell me those teams.
Do you want me to go down literally in order?
Just shout them out quickly.
They've beaten Burnley, Fulham, they drew with United, and they drew with West Brom. Then they beat Southampton, Newcastle, Chelsea, Brighton, Palace, Villa, West Brom, Sheffield United, Burnley again, and Liverpool. I would say
Chelsea
that
and Villa are the only 2 top half Premier League teams.
Liverpool and United as well.
They didn't beat United.
Oh no, sorry. Yeah, they drew with United. Yeah, they drew with United in the Manchester.
And Chelsea aren't great, and Aston Villa are going to finish 9th or 10th.
They beat Southampton as well,
who are now in the bottom half.
And Villa, and everyone's praising Villa.
Yeah, look, Villa have been good, but if you remember the Villa game, they were very lucky with a ridiculous offside decision.
What I mean, they have in this run they have beaten Burnley twice, and.
Congratulations! Give them the league title. They
no.
Twice.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I'm saying that was part of the.
What I will say about City though is, look, it was a good win against Liverpool. They've got a sticky next 5 fixtures.
They do, yeah, they do.
So look,
I'm sure they'll beat Spurs, but
the
Everton game and I'm sure they'll beat Arsenal, but the Everton game.
I think Leicester are in there as well.
Leicester, yeah, those are more challenging. That depresses me to say.
Yeah.
I,
So
I,
look,
I have absolutely no hope in Arsenal facing this City side. We're going to be killed. Just to talk about City,
Joe, I
I
don't
think
know that you will, because look, this is the thing about City. Watching them yesterday, that defense is
no.
not as good as everybody was giving them credit
No,
for.
man. Arsenal do not beat City. The only time in recent memory was that FA Cup game.
If Arsenal
We
go into that
fold
game with
against City
belief,
every
no,
time.
if they go in with belief, they have a chance. Especially from crosses yesterday, City looked really vulnerable. There were 2 or 3 crosses that Liverpool got on the end of. Sadio Mane headed one over the bar early on. They did look shaky, and Arsenal love to put balls into the box. They do. If Arsenal can defend properly, and that's what Liverpool didn't do. Liverpool gifted Manchester City 3 goals yesterday, and they gave them a penalty as well.
Did you see what Cedric Suarez did for the
Okay,
the
look,
Villa goal?
maybe I'm talking about the wrong team here. Okay,
You are. I'm afraid.
if they can put in a defensive performance and shut them out, which I know is a big ask because City are a good attacking team, they can score goals. They can hurt City. People are of this opinion that City are untouchable at the back, and they are not. They are there to be had at the back. Ruben Diaz failed the Mo Salah test yesterday. Don't forget that.
Well, I think when Salah's in that mood, and I mean, the falling over mood, I think every centre back, he's always going to be able to get behind centre backs. By the way, just to talk about that very briefly before we finish up, I cannot believe that wasn't a red card for Diaz after Luis got sent off for, I mean.
Yeah, denying a clear goal scoring opportunity while not playing the ball. I suppose the only thing was that who else was playing centre half with him? John Stones was covering, is the only thing. So maybe it wasn't a clear goal scoring opportunity.
Yeah, I just think we've seen. Well, anyway, that's for another day. But yeah, I just think we've seen some really poor officiating.
Okay, so look, we're in agreement that Liverpool could have done more in terms of recruitment, but we understand maybe why they haven't in terms of their model. We've looked at their playing style in terms of how the injuries have affected them and offset their midfield. But I suppose the biggest question that I have is why Liverpool are still persevering with midfielders in defence when it's clearly hampering their midfield so much. They don't have the in-depth midfield. Like when James Milner and Xherdan Shaqiri are starting games in midfield for Liverpool, you know there's an issue there, and there's no point in, like, I don't know that Nat Phillips and Ozan Kabak are going to be worse starters than Shaqiri and Milner. I don't know how you put one above the other, but instead you decide to dogleg your defenders and your attackers. So I suppose that I think that is the biggest consensus from Liverpool fans that I've seen, is that they want to see the midfielders return to midfield as soon as possible, especially Jordan Henderson, as we mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's extremely rare that sides can get away with playing players out of position for full. I mean, the only one that springs to mind is Milner playing left back. But if you have your other 10 players playing in their right positions, you can get away with that. But having to shoehorn really important midfielders into central defence for the entire season is a
the thing
big
about James
issue.
Milner. He wasn't a nailed-on starter somewhere else in the pitch. It's not like they took
they weren't
the best
taking
midfielder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Right. Well, look, Joe, thanks very much for joining me today. I don't feel any better about the weekend's results, but I do feel slightly relieved for having an event. I'm sorry I didn't allow you the opportunity to vent about Arsenal today, but I'm sure
we've done
plenty more opportunities
over
this season. Look, guys, remember to smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to whatever audio platform you're listening on, and we'll be back maybe later in the week, maybe next week. Who knows?